Hi there friends, it's Paisleyandglue and we are back for part 2 of our Sew With Me project. We are making a romper, and in this installment we are going to be putting our mock-up together to get it ready for our fitting. Okay, we are now ready to start putting our mock-up together. So when you're putting mock-ups together, often you don't need to do all of the steps that are required in the instructions, because all we need is sort of a shell of the garment with the basic seam stitch, but nothing needs to be finished, nothing needs to be lined. It goes together much quicker than the final garment will go together. So you'll get better as you learn how to sew and learning what steps you need to do for your mock-up and which steps you don't need to do, but we'll do this one together so you can kind of get an idea. So the first step in the instructions is it's telling me that we need to ease stitch the side seam of the front piece. So here's the front piece here, and we can see if we hold the back piece up to it and we match our notches here, we can see that the front piece is longer than the back piece. So what we need to do is we need to put some ease stitches in between these two dots so that it scrunches the fabric down to fit into the back seam. So we're going to do that right now. Okay, so in our instructions it says to gather one side edge of upper front between two small circles. So that's what this is showing you. You're going to stitch between these two circles on a large basting stitch, so something that you can pull. And when you're gathering, we are not going to do a back stitch because we want to be able to pull the ends and pull the fabric together and cinch it up. So let's talk about that. So I'm on a straight stitch right now. I'm going to lengthen this. And the instructions are showing me to do 2 rows of gathering stitches. I'm just going to do 1 for my mock-up, and we'll do 2 later. So make sure that you're sewing between your 2 circles. So between these 2 circles here, and this is at the 5/8 stitch line. We're going to line up the edge of our fabric with our 5/8 stitch line. There should be a line on your sewing machine here, and it will either notate the 5/8 line like mine does here. It says 5/8, or you can measure from where your needle goes down through the presser foot to the edge of the fabric. There should be a little notch there that you can follow. So I'm going to start at my circles, not doing a back stitch. And ending at the next circle. Not doing a back stitch, not finishing that off in any way. And you can pull your fabric out. And there's our gathering stitch. So if we pull this, we can see that it cinches up the fabric a little bit. And I do have a different color bobbin on than the top thread because, again, it's a mock-up and we're not super concerned. So again, I'm going to find my side seam, find these 2 dots on the other side. There's 2 front sides, right? You have a right and a left. And stitch between those 2 circles. Okay, next step. Next step in the real thing we're going to do later, we're going to go ahead and skip that ease stitch. We don't need to do that right now, but we are going to stitch the side seams together. So we're going to grab our upper back piece and our upper front piece, and we're going to stitch them together, matching our notches and the small circle. So here's one side. And we always want to keep sides together that have the markings on it. So I'm going to match my notches here, and you always sew right sides together. So this is my wrong side, it has my markings on it. This is the right side, which is clean. So the notches go together, and then we're going to gather up gather this up slightly. It's not very eased, it's not too much. And then match our circles, front, back. And then gather this in slightly so that that fullness is spread evenly across here. And again, this is not going to look very nice just in our mock-up. We're just getting a basic fit right now. And now you're going to stitch that at that 5/8 line, which should be right where your gathering stitches are. And I'm going to lower my stitch width a little bit so it's a normal length. And this time I am doing a back stitch so that that seam stays in and doesn't slip out. So there's my first seam. I'm going to take these pins out. And there we are. The front is attached to the side. You can do the same on the other side. Make sure that you're sewing the correct sides together. So again, the clean side should be facing each other. We're going to match these notches. Match the circle. And then pull this in slightly so that those gathers are evenly distributed. I should say too that you should try not to stitch over pins. I have a bad habit of doing that, and it does damage your machine timing if you hit a pin with your machine needle. So here is our other side seam sewn. So you can see that one, the front section is slightly gathered into the back, and we can go to the iron and we can press this seam open like so. So now the next thing it wants me to do on these instructions is to finish off the top section and the top of the bodice and roll all of these edges. We don't need to do that for our mock-up, but what I do want to do is I want to mark that stitch line where we're going to lose some of that width because we're going to turn this under. So I'm going to go ahead and do a basting line all the way around the top of the front and then turn it back so that it's not telling us the wrong information about where our neckline ends. Does that make sense? Okay, let's just do it. Again, I can make my stitch length a lot longer. Okay, so now we have this whole line basted around the front. So now I'm just going to take my iron and I'm just going to press this edge down towards the back interior of the bodice. And that's just going to tell me later where the eventual edge of my garment will be when I go to fit this. There are some spots here where we have a little bit of a significant curve here, so you're probably going to have to clip this a little bit right here. Grab some sharp small scissors and just clip and clip right up to that stitch line, and that's going to help you turn the fabric back because otherwise it won't turn that curve evenly. And doing a basting stitch line like this helps is much easier to do a basting stitch line than it is to just try to fold it back on a drawn line. The stitch line gives you a nice sort of edge to fold against when you're ironing. Pressing, I should say. And go ahead and clip anywhere it seems like it doesn't want to turn. We also need to do an ease stitch. We also need to do an ease stitch here along the base of the front piece, and that's just under the bust, and that's going to need to be eased into the waistband as well. So I'm going to do a short basting stitch just between the side seam and the center front. Until your bobbin runs out of thread. Now we need to attach the waistband onto the top. So if we look at our instructions, it tells us how that goes on. We are matching this little dot with the little dot that's here, now that's folded back. So that dot matches to there. These two dots correspond to the side seams. This dot corresponds to the center back line. And then you're going to match these notches. And then ease in the rest of this. Where is this thread coming from? Ease in the rest of that line of the front section so that it's smoothly placed against the waistband. Again, we're matching this notch to this dot here. That notch, this side seams, and the center back line. And we're gathering this up slightly. Okay, so there we are, ready to sew our top to our waistband. So we can go ahead and sew that at 5/8 all the way across the front. Okay, sew in the seam. Okay, so my waistband is on, and now I'm going to go to the iron and I'm going to press all this seam allowance, top and bottom, down so that it's facing down towards the floor and away from the body. Okay, so our next step is going to be making our pleats on the top of our shorts. So we need to pin the pleats into place and then baste them in place so that we can then attach the rest of the shorts together before we go any further. So what this is showing us is that we're working from the front. So when it's dark gray like this, that means it's the right side of the fabric, or the fabric you'll see on the outside. So I'm going to go ahead, this is my front pieces, flip this towards the front so that I've got my clean sections. And we can see that our pleats are facing towards the inseam, which is this curved section. And we're bringing our dots to match each other. So you can do this from the back. Just make sure that your pleats are going the right direction. So the dot comes from here and meets this dot here. So that's where that fold starts. And then it meets that dot, and you're making that pleat. Making sure top edges of your fabric still match. And again, that comes to meet right there. So that's how the pleats are going to look along the top of the short going into the waistband. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of the pinning like we see here, and then I'm going to baste those closed as they're pinned with a basting stitch. Okay, so our next step is we need to sew the out seams and the inseams of the shorts together. We're going to go ahead and skip this section that tells us about pockets, because we don't actually need that right now. So we are going to sew our inseam together, which is the short section, and then the out seam together, which is the long section. So the thing to remember here is that we want to make sure that we're sewing fronts and backs together and left and right. So you need a front section, and you can tell which one that is. It's the one that has a single notch on the inseam line, and the back has a double notch at the inseam line. So we're going to put fronts and backs together. And again, right sides also together. So we need a front and a back, and right sides are together because I have my notch on this side and I have my notch on this side. So we're going to sew that short inseam together there, and then we're going to sew the out seam together on the other side. And you can match your notches. At the bottom and the top. And then my other side again. Right sides are together. There's my marks, there's my marks. Sewing the inseam. And sewing the out seam. All right, so now I've sewn my out seams and my inseams, and now I'm going to go to the iron and I'm going to press open these seams with the iron to each side so that lays nice and flat. Okay, so now we get to the slightly trickier part. So now we need to sew the crotch seam. And so if we look at this, for crotch seam, turn one garment leg right side out, slip inside remaining garment leg, stitch, leaving free above large circle. You need to leave enough so that you can get into the shorts, of course, and above the large circle is where the zipper is ultimately going to go. We're not going to do that for the mock-up once again. It's just not quite necessary. So we're going to turn one side the right way. Remember, we need to sew our seams right sides together. So we're going to drop one of these into the other and then match up all of our notches and seams. So first, the easiest way to do that is to, now I've got right sides together in this inner crotch seam here. So I'm going to mark that point with the pin. And then I'm going to go to the center front. Make sure that those lines match up, and then match this notch in the center front. Match this curve. And then match these two back notches. So this guy here. And then this is where they're saying the zipper is going to go to. So we're going to end our stitch line right at that pin there. And we're going to leave all of this free so that we can get into it when we have our fitting, and ultimately the zipper will go into that space. So you're going to sew from this point all the way around this crotch seam to here at 5/8. so now my crotch seam is together. I can turn this right side out. And it's shorts. So I am going to press open the center front seam, not all the way around, but just until it starts to curve, just so the center front lays flat. And I'm going to do the same thing just in this very back, about maybe an inch or two. Okay, so the last step that we need to do before we can go ahead and try this on is we need to attach the waistband to the shorts. So again, we're going to match all of our notches from our shorts to the notches on the waistband and sew it together. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to match my center front line of the waistband to the center front line of the shorts, which also means that those two notches right next to each other should also correspond to those two notches on the shorts. And then I'm going to go ahead and skip over to the side seam, and I'm going to I'm going to pin those together, and then I'm going to pin the center back seam of the shorts to the center back seam of the waistband. And if you've done your pleats correctly, the shorts should fit pretty smoothly into the waistband. You may have to ease just a little bit, and that is fine. Again, matching center back, side seams, and then working my way around. Okay, so that is ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and stitch this all the way around at the 5/8 mark. Okay, so now again, I'm going to press all of my seam allowance up into the waistband so that this seam on the front lays flat, and then I am ready for a fitting. Okay, that is going to do us for part 2, and next time we will fit our mock-up and we will chew up our pattern to get it ready to cut in our real fabric. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about anything, and if you like what you're seeing, feel free to drop a subscribe. Thanks so much. See you next time.